Unpacking is a game about getting to know somebody via their possessions. It sells itself as a Zen puzzle game, where you can settle into the rhythm of putting things in their places one by one, and I can understand how that would be soothing to some people, but here's the thing. The way that I placed this trophy while I was recording footage with the placard not facing out is making me feel physically unwell. To put it simply, my neurodivergent brain is not very forgiving about the right placements for these objects. Take this diary. I couldn't tell you why, but I feel very strongly that it should just go there on the storage box. But the spine has to face outwards, and the game won't let you rotate it that way, so I had to find a different spot for it. And this is fine, but it's not right. It's really hard to describe, but it feels like there's something just slightly itchy inside my brain, and my skin crawls, the back of my eyes start to tingle like I'm gonna burst into tears. It's a really hard feeling to describe, but here's the thing. If you're neurodivergent, I feel like you probably know what I mean. It might not manifest in exactly the same way or in exactly the same situations, but you probably have a similar wrong feeling that you can at least draw on for comparison. And if you're neurotypical, I can't help you, you're just gonna have to use your imagination and go with me on this. But back to this level. It's fine, my brain's itching, but I'm used to it, we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna place these dolls and toys, and okay, there's 2 horses. The 2 horses should probably go together, and at first that's fine, I just keep going, except I'm stuck on this second horse. They just don't look good together. The second horse sits slightly further back on the shelf and it doesn't really look like the same make, so I put it on a different shelf, but then this book needs to go where I've put the horse, and so I'm sitting there for a full 10 seconds, hands off the keyboard, just staring at the screen, getting more annoyed at this fake plastic toy before eventually cramming it into the cupboard. This game is a few hours long. These 3 examples, trophy, diary, horse, all come from the first 5 minutes in what is basically the tutorial level. The game itself has rules that won't let you continue unless things are in a good enough place, but they're typically pretty forgiving. For me, it was like I was playing the whole game on hard mode because my brain was inventing new rules outside of the structure of the game itself. When I played this game the first time, my heart rate was higher than playing any kind of action game, I gave myself a headache from clenching my jaw, and then I had to play it again to get this footage and it didn't get any better. In fact, I had to play some parts a 3rd time, still bad. Even while I was watching my footage back to write this script, it was not a comfortable experience. But I really like the game, and actually I think this experience that I had led me to another reading of it that made me appreciate it that much more. Before we get to that, a few caveats. Firstly, I'm going to be using the umbrella term neurodivergency for a few reasons, but of course as an umbrella term that covers a lot, so not everything I'm saying will be applicable to all neurodivergent people. In fact, the only other writing I could find on this topic was by Eric Halliday at AppTrigger, who said that it made their neurodivergent brain happy to play, so your mileage may vary, this is just my experience. However, I do want to flag that I'm not saying OCD because that's a very specific term that's often misused, including people saying things like, unpacking is an OCD simulator, which it's not. Maybe if you aren't aware of all this, then look into it and then don't do that. Secondly, I really don't know where to put this point, but it's been bothering me the whole time I've been writing this script. I don't think that my gameplay here is particularly aesthetic. That is to say, I've seen other people arrange these things in ways that I do genuinely think are prettier than mine, and you might be looking at this and thinking it's ugly, and yes, it definitely kinda is. As I mentioned, I was mostly being driven by stress, and just generally speaking, I don't think I have the strongest aesthetic sense, so I'm not saying that my way of placing things was perfect, I'm saying it followed an internal rule set. That rule set was not always neat. Basically, don't be mean about my ugly shelves, I already know. Thirdly, I'm going to spoil some major parts of Unpacking. I think that what's interesting about the game is much more its narrative structure and how many little details are woven into these objects and the places that the protagonist lives, but if you don't want to be spoiled, then I definitely recommend playing it. It only takes a couple of hours and it's good as hell. Fourthly, and hopefully you already guessed this by the fact that I just said this game rules, but I'm not criticizing Unpacking here. Actually, as I said, I think that playing it as a neurodivergent person gives it this whole other layer, so let me stop qualifying and actually talk about that. So Unpacking, the activity, not the game, lowercase u, is pretty difficult at the best of times for anybody. And Unpacking the game, capital U, uses that for both its narrative and its challenge. When you move into a little dorm room, of course there's not a lot of space in the closet. That makes the whole game more than just throwing things into place and lets us empathize with a character who's just moved out and is suddenly in this cramped little student accommodation. But by playing in this self-imposed hard mode, I'm sort of accidentally role-playing the protagonist as a neurodivergent person themselves. And this isn't just in terms of where things go, like I talked about earlier, it actually affects how I play the game itself. And in the same way as an action RPG might let you have your character as someone being super sneaky or bombastic and loud, my own mannerisms ended up in this protagonist. Like, looking back at this footage, there's loads of times where I actually gloss over things that now looking back at them make my throat close up a little bit. Like this dorm cabinet, for example, ends up being really disorganized. But then, when something throws me off, I can get into these miniature spirals where I just get more and more antsy with like one tiny part of the level. Take this for instance, where what I realize is that I want to be able to turn the sock so that the rolled end faces away from the camera, but the game won't let you do that, and suddenly I'm fixated on this drawer. You can tell that I've got tunnel vision because I'm doing things like lining up the underwear even though it's gonna have to be moved immediately as soon as I pick up another pair. And like earlier you can tell I was just putting things in place as a placeholder because the notebooks are just chilling on the bed, and that's fine because I'm getting back to them. But in this micro moment of hyper focus, everything has to be right. And then if something else gets added, it has to be corrected again, even though I know that correction is coming. In the end, all of this underwear gets matched by color, including this part at the end where I go back and reorganize it so the pinks and purples are together, which again you can tell doesn't always matter to me because the jeans and shirts right above them are all mixed. And then once this drawer is done, I'm able to go back to a more casual approach. For comparison, here's the underwear drawer in the next place. It's not even tessellated properly because I wasn't in one of these spirals. I was just feeling much more chill. This probably looks really minor watching it back, and in the grand scheme of things of course it is, but I can see my own discomfort and frustration here. And it overlaps with the narrative of the protagonist, adding this extra layer to the whole game. Every scene is them unpacking in a new place with the pressure and anxiety that's already inherent to that. In this scene, it's the first time they've moved out of their parents' place. That's already stressful. It feels natural that they might have these moments where they get fixated on wanting to get things exactly right. It's another layer of characterization, just not one that everyone will experience. Having said that, I do think there are moments when this is visible to any player if you look from the right angle. As I said before, at the end of every level, the game will point out anything that isn't in its right place, and this is usually pretty forgiving, but there are a few times where it isn't. Take this for example. The razor and the nail clipper cannot go in the cupboard. They cannot go on the shelves, they have to go in a drawer, but not the bottom drawer. Or in this one where the dish sponges can't go in this cupboard. And here you can see where my neurodivergency actually clashes with the potential neurodivergency of the character, because for the game it's fine for these to go into the drawer here, but despite having successfully finished the level, I was like, absolutely not actually. Luckily we were both kind of okay with them going in this next cupboard over. There are probably more examples, but I feel like I missed a lot of them by playing fastidiously in my own way, which is maybe ironic, but I read this whole mechanic, this central mechanic of the whole game, as in part an expression of the protagonist's own neurodivergency. Those mini spirals I described earlier aren't totally exterior to the rest of the game, they're actually accurate to other things the game is telling us about its main character. Basically what I'm saying is that if you played this game and were zen about it, you should get good. Jokes aside, this reading of the protagonist as neurodivergent adds a lot to the rest of what makes this game good. For example, a lot of praise for Unpacking has centered on this level, 2010. In their article about it on Kotaku, Ari Notice wrote, "It's clear the main character is moving in with some dude. Without even showing his obviously stupid face, you can tell that this boyfriend character is just the fucking worst." 2010 is the first level in which Unpacking feels truly cramped. It is off-putting, to put it charitably, that this dude who was fully planning on moving in with someone didn't even bother to make an inch for his incoming partner. This is completely true, and the full article is a good exploration of one of the key moments of storytelling in Unpacking. I'll link it in the description if you want to read it, but it goes on to talk about the fact that you have to cram your diploma under the bed because there's no room on the walls for it, which is obviously a demonstration of what Notice calls this guy's tree-rooted stubbornness, which is just a great phrase, but more metaphorically it could be read as a representation of how little the boyfriend thinks of their partner's accomplishments. But through this lens of a neurodivergent protagonist, he's callous in other ways too. Like, sure, you technically have enough space, but if everywhere you put your stuff feels physically terrible and he doesn't seem to care or even notice, you start to wonder about what other accommodations he's not making. On the other hand, when a different partner moves in with you later on in the game, it's literally you putting their things away. And I know to a degree that's because that's how the game works, but I can imagine this person being open enough to compromise that they're willing to allow the protagonist to do this in order for them to be comfortable, particularly in what is again a potentially stressful situation. Along with all the other things, it adds a layer to the narrative that this is just a much more accommodating, cooperative relationship. So all in all, I think this reading makes things that much richer in a really interesting way. And I stumbled into it just by never being zen for a single moment in my entire life.